Ever since I first got my hands on Doom many years ago, I'd been nigh on obsessed with first-person shooters, and it got me thinking, if I had to choose 10 levels I believe everyone who's a fan of the genre absolutely must play, what would they be? So I decided to make this list, a roundup of my favourites from all my years of gaming, a selection I consider to be the cream of the crop. Before we begin, it's worth noting that a few of these games could be classed as immersive sims, but they are in first person and you can shoot things, so throw me a bone. And also, because they're all blooming marvellous, I present them to you in no particular order. Anyways, without further ado, let's get cracking. I still remember the first time I played Halo Combat Evolved's best level vividly. At the time, I only owned a PlayStation 2 and was extremely skeptical of Microsoft as the new kid on the block, until I visited a friend and we started playing Halo's campaign in split-screen co-op. I was definitely very impressed from the game's outset. Its first half in particular is one of the best in any FPS ever, and then we reached the silent cartographer and I knew I had to own an Xbox as soon as I possibly could. It's really no surprise that it was the mission developer Bungie chose to use for the game's various demos. Opening with its very own sci-fi beach invasion, it gets its hooks into you from minute one as you clear an area teeming with Covenant, after which a warthog is dropped in so you can explore the area proper. The beauty of the silent cartographer is that it gives you choices. You can choose to ignore the battle on the beach entirely and head in the opposite direction. You can journey to the island's main structure, your primary objective, or you can skip it entirely and head to a nearby security room first, and Halo will actually tweak its dialogue depending on the choice you make. It's also a very dynamic experience, with human and enemy dropships constantly entering and exiting the fray, while radio messages keep you updated on the wider conflict taking place across the ring. The many engagements you take part in are masterfully designed as well, and every single one feels handcrafted for maximum impact. Whether it's launching yourself off a ramp right into the middle of a pack of bloodthirsty aliens, fighting hunters from a distance, or jumping out your skin when the elite with a sword seen earlier in the level finally decides to try and take you down, you're kept right on the edge of your seat. It's the level that for me solidified Halo Combat Evolved as the shooter to beat during the 6th generation of consoles, and it's one I still replay regularly to this very day. Halo Combat Evolved may have been the game which demonstrated that a console FPS could compete with the best the PC had to offer, but Goldeneye on the Nintendo 64 was the first to really break into the mainstream, and it's easy to see why. Its blend of robust first-person combat and aesthetic and soundtrack that oozed James Bond from its every pore combined to create something that had never been seen before on a console. No better level exemplifies that winning formula than GoldenEye's second mission, Facility. It begins with a short crawl through a ventilation system before you quite literally get to catch your enemies with their pants down in the gents' toilets, and from there it's the quintessential spy 'em up as you work your way through the building, mowing down guard after guard, on your way to meet friend soon to be turned foe Alec Trevelyan. With guards patrolling different areas and NPC scientists hiding or fleeing in fear as you approach, it truly felt like you were infiltrating a bustling military complex, and the multiple objectives you needed to complete to reach its end added a layer of unprecedented complexity to proceedings. Oh, and did I mention that it near perfectly mirrors one of the film's most exciting moments too? Compared to some of the more modern games featured in this video, its gameplay may not seem like a huge jump over titles like Doom and the like, but for a console to take that formula and make it its own was an incredibly exciting proposition. These days, it's tricky to find a way to actually play GoldenEye due to the various licensing issues that have hamstrung various re-releases and remasters, but if you can find a way to play it, let me tell you, it will be well worth it. There are many things the Half-Life series is known for: Gordon Freeman, Black Mesa, the G-Man, and more recently as a cutting-edge VR experience. But there's definitely an argument to be made that it should be acknowledged for its horror elements as well. It's something that wasn't a particular focus for developer Valve in 1998's Half-Life, although it did feature its fair share of tense moments. But over time, it's become an important part of the series as a whole. Half-Life 2's level We Don't Go to Ravenholm is a fabulous example example of why. Ravenholm marks a stark shift in the game's tone. Previously, you'd been exploring mostly well-lit areas, often bathed in sunlight, until suddenly you find yourself exploring an abandoned town in the dead of night, marking a shift from sci-fi action to the macabre. Fortunately, you're well equipped for the spot of bother you find yourself in, having been presented with the gravity gun mere moments prior, and what follows is a level that is half horror shooter and half tutorial. Straight away, Valve begins to teach you how to utilize this incredible new weapon. You've already had the chance to play catch with it prior, but now you have to think outside the box to use it to your full advantage. Some pointers are obvious, such as the wall of saw blades you encounter early on, while others require you to be a little bit more creative, but either way, you never feel like your hand is being held, even if it is a bit. However, it's not just the foreboding atmosphere or introduction of the gravity gun that makes Ravenholm tick, it's also about what's built around it. Several new enemies are introduced, variations of the zombies which first appeared in the original Half-Life. Father Grigori is a constant presence, shepherding you through the map right up until his fiery demise, and a multitude of traps and physics-based opportunities help highlight the best of what was at the time one of the most magnificent video game engines ever seen. It's a terrifying, oppressive masterpiece that every gamer should endeavour to play at one point or another. Somewhere below the sea in the city of Rapture lies the district of Fort Frolic, an adult playground citizens could visit to shop, gamble and cavort to their heart's content. The level set there is one of incredible quality, and it is perhaps the best part of BioShock in its totality, which is particularly impressive given just how many jaw-dropping moments are included in the game. But as joyous a place as Fort Frolic might sound from my albeit very brief description, by the time protagonist Jack arrives in the area, its bright lights and opulence have become little more than a facade, masking something far sinister. Before you even arrive in the area proper, you're introduced to crazed artist Sander Cohen, Fort Frolic's de facto leader, and with there being no way to escape his clutches, you're forced to help him create a twisted work of art known as a quad-tick. And so you travel the district, hunting down, killing and photographing Cohen's enemies, so they can then be memorialized at the center of his horrific display. What makes Fort Frolic so memorable is that it's almost its own self-contained short story. Your time spent in the area does build on the game's overarching narrative to some degree, but it's very much in the background. What you get instead is a cautionary tale about what might happen when the artist is freed from the censor. Fort Frolic becomes a monument to Cohen's madness, a reflection of his insanity, while Cohen himself reflects the corrupting ideals of Rapture. He is a man driven to the brink of madness when no longer burdened by morality. Add to this an extraordinary number of clever touches, such as the spotlight following you wherever you go, the statues which seem to move whenever you look away, and the area's final encounter set to Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers, and what you get is a level that's dark, unsettling, and unforgettable. If you're someone who's intrigued by the concept of the butterfly effect, then Dishonored 2's time-travelling pièce de résistance will probably tickle your pickle. A Crack in the Slab starts out calmly enough as you search a derelict manor for former mining magnate Aramis Stilton, but soon everything begins to get somewhat bonkers. For one thing, Aramis is mad as a box of frogs, and for another, you'll be gifted a very special timepiece by your otherworldly sidekick of sorts, the Outsider. Why is the timepiece so special? Well, it's special because it not only allows you to travel between the present and the night your nemesis Delilah returned some 3 years ago, but also because you can use its lens to look into one time zone while remaining in the other. Receiving the timepiece is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it opens up a wealth of new gameplay possibilities, and it's a curse because you lose all your other powers in the process. That's right, there will be no blinking between vantage points or possessing rats during A Crack in the Slab. Instead, the level plays more like a gigantic puzzle of sorts, as you move between past and present to access new areas or to avoid guards being a nuisance. What's most impressive about it is Arcane's commitment to the concept as a whole. There are plenty of smaller puzzles dotted throughout the manor that require you to change the way you think about things, such as this balcony you can destroy in the past that creates a new route in the present, or this dog in the past that you can burn to prevent bloodflies blocking you from accessing a safe 3 years later. But there's also far greater consequences depending on your choices. You can allow Stilton to attend Delilah's ritual, which means the present will remain the same, with an insane find Stilton still head of a ruined house. You can also kill Stilton, and if you do, you'll find that in the present the house is now in a better state, although it is full of rats and the owner is looking to sell. And finally, you can knock him unconscious, at which point travelling to the present reveals the manor to be thriving under the watch of a totally sane Stilton. There's a shed load more things that change that I've no time to list here, so I'd recommend you give it a try and spot them all yourselves. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. From one slice of time-travelling brilliance, we transition directly into another. If Dishonored 2's A Crack in the Slab is the thinking man's take on the concept, then Titanfall 2's Effect and Cause is something a bit racier. There's no time to sit around planning your next move during this high-tempo affair. Instead, thinking on your feet is key to survival as you move between a past and present, both packed full of enemies looking to make mincemeat of you. Effect and Cause doesn't throw you straight into the deep end, however, with its first half actually playing out at a relatively serene pace. You explore an abandoned facility while bouncing between time zones, something you have little control over, as Titanfall 2 subtly demonstrates to you how everything works. The tension continues to build and build, the action slowly begins to intensify, and soon you'll be on the edge of your seat, waiting with bated breath to find out what's going to happen next. And then, around the level's midpoint, you come across a mysterious high-tech looking glove you promptly put on, and the most wonderful button prompt in all of gaming appears on screen. Press LB, or whatever button you've assigned it to time travel. From that point onwards, Effect and Cause does not let up for 1 minute, as you phase in and out of past and present while wall running, sliding between enemies, leaping through the air, and of course, blasting your foes to smithereens. Developer Respawn Entertainment also masterfully increases the complexity of encounters right up until the mission's very end, where you find yourself jumping backwards and forwards in time while also piloting BT-7274, your enormous robot buddy. It is a relentless thrill ride that introduces an amazing new mechanic, teaches you how to use it, and pushes your reflexes to their very limit, all within a single level. It's first-person combat at its most spectacular. It might be a tad older than many others featured in this video, but regardless, Operation Overlord in Medal of Honor Allied Assault remains to this day one of the best FPS levels ever created. Back in 1998, cinematic tour de force Saving Private Ryan had wowed moviegoers with its incredible depiction of the Omaha beach landings, and some 3 years or so later, gamers were able to experience it for themselves too. It might not look like much nowadays, but at the time of Allied Assault's release, Operation Overlord was a visceral ordeal unlike any other. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it was revolutionary. You see, back in 2001, this kind of cinematic action stuffed full of scripting and set pieces simply didn't exist. Half-Life had without doubt blazed a trail, introducing you to a Black Mesa that felt more alive than any other video game environment at the time, but most developers were still figuring out how best to mimic Valve's unique style. Allied Assault, on the other hand, wasn't just a cheap imitation clinging desperately to Gordon Freeman's coattails. Developer 2015 Games instead took what Half-Life had introduced and made it their own, where scripting and set pieces were used to add colour to the world of Black Mesa. During Operation Overlord and other missions in the game, these sequences became the experience. From the level's outset, you're surrounded by fellow soldiers who charge alongside you up the beach, and you're constantly being guided through a carefully constructed path of heavily directed scenes which back in 2002 were hard to spot through the ensuing chaos. What lets the mission down when playing it in the present is undoubtedly its gameplay, which feels very, very basic compared to modern Call of Duty titles and similar, but nonetheless, Operation Overlord is a level that you absolutely should play, if only to see how beautifully it bridged the gap between video games and cinema. I remember watching Microsoft's E3 2007 conference and being moderately excited by most of what was on display until Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare appeared on screen. The mission being demoed was all ghillied up, and from the moment an unseen Macmillan rose from the ground ahead of the player character, I knew I was watching something very special. Thankfully, when it was finally my turn to play through Modern Warfare's campaign, it didn't disappoint. For me, All Ghillied Up is the pinnacle of the Call of Duty style shooter subgenre, a level so tightly designed around its scripted moments and set pieces that it's difficult not to immediately get fully immersed in proceedings. Throughout the level, you'll be following Macmillan's orders, darting between cover and taking down enemies where appropriate as you make your way towards the ruined city of Pripyat. Your first time through is completely absorbing, with the sections forcing you to go prone as a whole squadron of bad guys slowly walks towards you and the sprint between vehicles being standouts, but it might surprise you to hear that it's on multiple playthroughs where the true extent of developer Infinity Ward's brilliance really begins to become apparent. Call of Duty games are often maligned these days for their very linear approach to level design, and at first glance, All Ghillied Up will likely do nothing to assuage you of that. But when you look under the hood of this particular slice of gold, you'll quickly come to realise that it's so much more layered than it has any right to be. There are so many instances where the game will react appropriately to your actions, many I'd wager most will miss. Macmillan's dialogue will change constantly depending on when or if you choose to take down certain guards. A helicopter you're meant to avoid can actually be fought, with it blowing up a nearby church in the process, and a wild dog will suddenly give way to a pack of wild dogs should you decide to gun it down. Your differing choices are accounted for every step of the way, and I can't imagine how tough a task it must have been to get everything working exactly the way it should. This is a level many of you will have likely already played, but I'd say give it another go while playing differently from how you normally would, because you might be surprised by what happens next. I don't think I could ever make a video like this without talking about what is my favourite opening sequence in any video game full stop. Prey doesn't exactly begin with the most exciting of scenes. You wake up in the shoes of Morgan Yu and begin your day, with your first tasks being to put on your company's uniform and head to the heliport on the roof of your apartment building to travel to work. Using a helicopter to commute is unusual, I can't argue with that, but beyond that oddity, nothing about Morgan's morning routine or the environment you find yourself in seems especially out of the ordinary considering the futuristic setting, except if you take the time to look closer, there's quite a few things going on that don't make much sense. In the kitchen, there's a cookbook published in 2033, which is rather odd considering your alarm clock said earlier that it's March 15th, 2032. You can find various scuff marks on the floor, as if something has been repeatedly moved over the surface. In the hallway leading to the elevator, if you exhaust all the dialogue with Patricia Varner, it begins to seem like she's less a maintenance worker and more like an actor. And there's plenty more besides. It's difficult to say much more without spoiling Prey's opening entirely, and honestly it's one of my favourite parts of any game that I highly recommend you try, but suffice to say, you'll soon realise that developer Arcane Studios has been sneakily training you to observe the smaller details around you, and with good reason. Being able to spot something that doesn't belong might just save your life. The true genius of it all is that whether you're eagle-eyed or blind as a bat, you'll still be just as shocked by the events which follow shortly after, as your expectations are subverted in the best way possible. What more can I say? It's absolutely mind-bogglingly fantastic. Go play it as soon as you can. Now, I know this is sort of cheating as I've tried to keep it to one level per franchise and there is already a Halo level in this video, but last and by no means least, we have what I think is the best level on offer in any Halo title, the Covenant from Halo 3. This is a mission which really does feature everything that makes the series so special. In narrative terms, the stakes are incredibly high as Master Chief races to prevent the Prophet of Truth from firing the rings, an action which would mark the end of all life in the galaxy, but it's the frankly insane amount of variety packed into its runtime that makes it truly exceptional. Beginning with an homage to the silent Cartographer's beach battle, from there Bungie throws in every trick in the Halo book. The narrow to open level design philosophy so prevalent throughout the series is included in abundance as you race between expansive outdoor areas and tighter, more curated indoor encounters. It also has more vehicle sections than you can shake a stick at, giving you the opportunity to mow down Covenant in everything from a teeny tiny ghost or mongoose to an enormous scorpion tank or hornet. And to top it all off, it features two of my favourite sequences in any Halo game within a single level back to back. First, you take to the sky guys to battle not one but two scarabs at the same time, a set piece so thrilling I'm always amazed it wasn't used as the level's final crescendo. Second, you ally with terrifying space zombies the Flood in pursuit of a mutually beneficial goal, and for a few shocking moments you find out what it's like to fight alongside Halo's most horrifying enemy rather than against them. Despite there still being 2 more levels to complete following the conclusion of the Covenant, in many ways it feels like the culmination of Bungie's time with the trilogy, a non-stop treat for the senses which takes everything so beloved about the series and dials it up to 11. Halo 3 may have been followed by a further 2 titles before Bungie's time with the series came to an end, but I don't think anything featured after, or indeed before, managed to reach the ridiculous heights of their magnum opus, the Covenant. So there we have it, those are the FPS levels I think you absolutely must try if you're a fan of the genre. I really appreciate you checking the video out, boys, girls and fraggers. If you had a roaring good time, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your favourites, and hopefully I'll catch you all again soon.